correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here with my friend Steve.
Hello, Steve.
And we're going to talk some RPGs. But before we do that, we're going to talk about dead podcasts.
Well, you
Or
mean the podcast
coming back from the dead?
maybe podcast no one ever
Possibly.
listens to.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard Order 66 dropped 2 new episodes.
They have, and they're dope. I haven't listened to the second one yet, but what they're doing, for anyone who hasn't not listened, Phil and Chris are building out a brand new era in the Star Wars universe for gameplay. They're calling it, my brain just stopped, Fractured Empire. Is that right? Or Fractured Republic? Fractured Republic.
I think it's Fractured Republic.
Yeah, which is, if I remember right, they're going 150 years after The Last Jedi. So they're going way past, anything we've seen thus far from Disney and LFL and whatever. And what I've heard thus far, this is going to be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited. I haven't got a chance to listen. It's on the list of things to listen to. I should be able to get to it like this week or like next week. But yeah, I haven't. I'm excited. Anything they do is always a good time.
Well, they're just so, they're so into it. Phil has written on a number of books for Fantasy Flight, now Edge, for the game. So in addition to they're just both mega fans, Chris has been podcasting about it for, 15, 17, 16 years,
Right.
from back in the Saga days. So, they're both very passionate, very knowledgeable.
And it's always a good time sitting down and listening to the two of them.
Oh, yeah. So, we'll throw a link to that in the show notes. I'm sure if you search the Order 66 podcast on any of your podcast apps, you'll find it easy enough.
I'm sure you can find it. I know it's on Apple, Spotify, all those fun places.
Yeah.
As
And,
an aside, go ahead.
I was going to say also just, if you're curious, looking for more cool podcasts, just go to the D20 Radio Network homepage, and there's a whole bunch of them there to choose from. Bunch of cool stuff. So,
yeah. As an aside, a trailer for a Lego Star Wars thing dropped, almost a Lego Star Wars What If, and I want all of my TTRPG Star Wars experiences to be like that. I want the crazy, weird, ridiculous, that's how I want to play the game.
hey, that's the cool thing about gaming, right? You get to do it your own way.
But speaking of doing things your own way, you had brought up a topic that was sort of suggested.
Yeah. So, I don't know, about a month ago or a month and a half ago, we did a couple of shows around action and intrigue and kind of talked about how, you kind of need to have a balance of them for a sustained game.
Right.
There are exceptions, I think, in whatever, but you kind of need to have a balance of them because it just holds everyone's interest better. All action can be fun in bursts, but
It can't just all be action. Yeah.
right. All intrigue starts making your brain melt after a while.
Right. No, completely. Yeah, and I think so. Just to break into this a little bit, if you're cool with that.
Yeah.
I think the big thing is, and it's going to be, this is the phrase of the night, depending on your table. You either want to balance it with traditional D&D setup is 2 combats and a social encounter for I don't remember what it is, a 2-hour session. So every 2 hours, they expect you to have 2 combats at least in a social encounter.
2 hours might be enough for 2 combats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But that was old D&D, if I'm
well,
remembering right.
but I mean, like, I think, yeah, I mean, that's a way to do it. I was going to suggest, and we talked about this a little bit before we, turned on the robots and all, but I was actually going to suggest that people go and watch, well, now it's a little bit older series, very well regarded, the Expanse on Amazon. I'm about halfway through season 2, and I've not watched it before, and I'm not gonna. I'll try to not spoil it for anyone who's not yet watched it, which I know you said you haven't. But I feel like watching that, they go back and forth between action and intrigue amazingly well. And using one to punctuate the other, break the other. It's really cool, like the way they weave it together in terms of stuff happens, what's going on, you know, and I think that's kind of a good blueprint. I haven't, like written things down and broken it down as to how I think they're doing it, but I have some kind of things I've noticed they tend to do.
Well, and yeah, sort of to talk a little bit about that and pull back the curtain some. The idea, and I completely agree with this idea, is that the best balance of action and intrigue is the easiest way to balance action and intrigue is to steal from movies and television.
I
If you
mean,
go if you go and, you know, watch whatever TV show that is more action or Texas Ranger or whatever,
mhm,
you're going to have bits of intrigue, bits of action, and it's going to balance out well enough that everybody walks away feeling satisfied with what they've consumed.
mhm,
And I think that's an easy, cheap way to just do it this. But it's fun where it is fun as a GM. It's fun to push, maybe we run this combat encounter a little bit longer. Maybe we run this social encounter a little bit longer. And you balance it out based on what's happening.
yeah. Well, I think too, though, like you said, depending on your table is a key factor here because, you mentioned like Walker Texas Ranger. Well, let's be honest. Yes, there's some intrigue, but we all know in the end that there's going to be a fight, and Chuck Norris is going to roundhouse kick the guy in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. I absolutely enjoy watching Chuck Norris roundhouse kick some guys to the face.
No, and like I said, it's an easy show to poke fun at
Oh, every
because
Thursday night on CBS. Yeah.
um, but you're right. They do kind of balance it out, right? There's the investigation scenes and then action scenes.
So
But I
I'm.
think
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think usually, and I mean, I've seen quite a bit of Walker. I wouldn't call myself a big fan, but it's one of those ones that sometimes gets put on because it's good background noise kind of TV, at least for my wife and I. But I think most of the time with Walker, you have the intrigue leading up to the action, and the action is your climax, and then it all resolves from there.
Right.
Where I've been really impressed with The Expanse is, and again, being able to binge watch it, and it's not episodic like Walker, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Episodic that's a different beast.
But what they seem to be able to do is use both action or intrigue to kind of interrupt the other,
Mm-hmm.
and it serves to turn both of them up in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good tool to have is to interrupt intrigue with action or action with intrigue because it does tend to crank everything up a little bit because if you're having a conversation with somebody and then all of a sudden a fight breaks out to shut that conversation down or a fight breaks out because the bad guy shows up, that adds intrigue on top of intrigue. It adds another layer of something to invest into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like that's the thing that I've really appreciated thus far with The Expanse is how it kind of keeps you off balance, and just when you think you're going to have that big climactic resolution of one or the other one breaks in.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's really cool.
And I think you're right too. You mentioned, that one of the best ways to do this is steal from, media, movies, TVs, books. Well, look, those are storytellers. That's what
Mhm.
we're doing as you're doing as a GM, and to a certain point as a player as well. So yeah, why not beg, borrow, and steal from that? And actually, I haven't told you yet, but I'm working on lining up GM Brev, who I met at Gamer Nation Con, who is both an
Okay.
role player and part of the Movie Defenders podcast, to come on and do an episode to talk about the back and forth between movies and RPGs and stuff.
Yeah, that'll be cool. Yeah, let me know when we're doing that. I'm excited.
Yeah, because I mean, that's a good podcast too. They used to be part of the D20 network, but
I'll have to check it out. I'm not gonna lie. So speaking on episodic television and watching television reminds me of tabletop RPGs, because we talked a little bit about Star Wars at the top of the order, and talking about action and intrigue. My girlfriend, her favorite TV show right now is 911. It's crazy.
okay,
It's very melodramatic,
okay,
and I could really have a good time playing some firefighters and police going through that they go through. Kind of,
Mhm.
it would be fun as actually got me making a Mutants and Masterminds game again, because I
Oh,
was
cool.
watching it and I've been watching X-Men 97, which, if you like X-Men and you have not watched X-Men 97 yet, you really need to fix that.
Fair.
It is, I know I was marveled out, but it is the best of Marvel that I've seen in decades at this point. Like,
Okay.
X-Men 97 is fantastic. Fantastic. I read most of the comic lines that it's based off of, and it is so on point and so accurate and so crazy good. I love it. But yeah, highly recommend it. But that's another one that balances. I mean, if you want to talk about the greatest superhero soap opera, it's the X-Men. It's Scott are gonna have a baby. Oh no, the baby was kidnapped by Sinister, right? Like, it's, Professor Xavier's dead, or so you think. you know, it,
Mhm.
it's so good, and it's such a good example of that kind of. And it's episodic, but not. It's a very you guys have been playing Monster of the Week. It's a very Monster of the Week kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
This week we're going to do this. Next week we're going to do that. But it is a tied storyline. So every episode that happens is perpetuating the storyline further. And I think it hits that perfect balance of action and intrigue in a lot of ways, because it has these really beautiful action set pieces, and then also has very touching, relatable moments with characters that you're a connection with. And
Mhm.
in a tabletop sense, it feels like a long running tabletop campaign, right? Like, it feels like we've been at this for a little while, and everybody has a rapport with each other, and everybody has a relationship to uphold. And, we're reaching a point where everybody is either wanting to move on from characters, or splitting off to do their own thing.
Kind of like
And
Rebels in the Star Wars universe in a way.
yeah, in a way, Rebels. It definitely has that kind of like, everybody is when this is over, everybody's going their separate ways, because we all got a life we want to live.
Mhm.
But I can't wait for another season of that. That is so
Cool.
good. And it's a direct continuation of the X-Men cartoon from 1997.
Ah, okay.
So if you ever watched it, it's a direct continuation. I'll tell you, you don't have to watch you don't have to watch the original cartoon. It helps. You don't go into it quite as blindsided, but
Mhm.
they catch you up on pretty much everything you need to know.
Well, fair. So while you were saying all that, it got me thinking. I think Rebels is another good inspiration for kind of balancing action and intrigue, right? Because you always had action happening, but there were these intrigue storylines going behind a lot of it.
Yeah, action happened because of the intrigue on Rebels in a lot of ways.
A lot of ways, yes. And then you had, the different kind of background story arcs kind of occasionally, meeting up, tying together, whatever. I think so. I want to bring up another series that my wife and I started watching, and this is on Paramount. It's called Tracker.
I've watched a bit of Tracker. Tracker is really good.
It is, but tell me if you think I'm misrepresenting this when I say it this way. Tracker feels like it's very predictable, but it never gives you exactly what you expected.
No, it almost has that X-Files vibe. X-Files feels very predictable, but doesn't always throw you.
Yeah, well, like Tracker, I would say it doesn't really throw you curves. It just like almost gets where you thought it was going, but doesn't quite, but not in an unsatisfying way.
Right.
And I wonder if that's something you could mine for use in RPGs, where your party is expecting this, and this, and well, they sort of get it, but they get something else too. You know what I mean?
Very much so. Very much so. You're not getting exactly what you expected, and that is sort of a benefit to that type of storyline.
Like I feel like, and like I said, we've been watching. I think we're all caught up on it. Tracker is something where by the end of the episode, you're never really surprised, but there was stuff you didn't expect, and I don't know how to quantify that for use in an RPG, but I think it's valuable.
Well, I think you need to. I'll explain this in a minute, but I think you need to almost. You would have to almost Chekhov's gun it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would almost have to early on in either the campaign or the session or whatever set up a clue to what the ending is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then build, and then cut to the clue that you were setting up in the beginning and not what the players necessarily think should be the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would elicit quite an entertaining response, in my opinion. I think players would be very open to something like that.
Yeah, like it's.
But you can only do that. I think it's a trick in a lot of ways. I don't think that works as an RPG thing that you can do over and over and over again.
No, I think that would definitely have to be used
like as a punctuation in a lot of ways.
Yes. Which that actually is what I see them doing a lot in The Expanse, is like they're using the changes as punctuation. And there's also, and again, try not to spoil this for anyone who hasn't seen it. There's a sequence that happens. I want to say it's in the first couple, like the first episode or two of season 2, where this one character does something that just sort of like stops everyone dead in their tracks. And I'm looking at that and I went, well, I wonder, you have to have established if and it, I'll just say it's Thomas Jane's character.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Wilson, I think, is the name of the character. I don't remember. But anyway, he does this thing and I'm thinking, if but because you've been watching him for over a season, he's got established motivations. He's got some background. He's got some internal stuff going on that you're at least somewhat aware of. So he's got his own motivations in addition to the greater storyline. And so he does this thing. And I was thinking, if you could use an established NPC to do these kind of punctuation mark things that kind of, signal these transitions or are bursts of one in the midst of the other, I think that's something that could be really effective. But I think to do that, you need to have those characters set up so that it doesn't just seem like a random act.
Right.
At least most
completely.
of the time. The occasional random act is also a good way to kind of, move between those. But again, I think that's one of those, like you mentioned before, where you can't go to that well too often,
right?
Because if you do, it just it gets weird.
It loses its sting.
Mm-hmm.
You have to mix the good with the bad. There just always has to be a mix of good with bad. Yeah.
But like, like watching The Expanse, it's like they'll be doing something and there's this intrigue and all of a sudden it breaks into action. And then as the action stops, you're left with more questions, more intrigue that as they investigate that, again, another action sequence. And it just feels like good story building. You know what I mean? Like where it's, yes, they're resolving some things, but not completely. And so those unresolved bits kind of carry on and build, and some of them fit together. And it's just like I said, that has been really intriguing. And their kind of blend reminded me of, the comment that we got on Patreon about, how to mix them.
Right.
So I know you've got more kind of formal experiences writing and stuff than I do, I think. You have anything you picked up in doing that ties into this?
I'm trying to think if there's anything that's like coming to mind that I do. I think the big picture is, especially with Intrigue, as a GM, understanding how the pieces fit. Meaning, so like, if I give a name to my players, that name better be able to have something useful for them, even if it's the wrong name, right? That name needs to progress the story in some way or the other. You can't be you can't penalize them too much for finding the wrong information, because in a book or in a movie or TV show or whatever, you might have 15 people that you talk to that's the wrong person. Like let's say, perfect example of this, it's all Intrigue. Let's take like Law and Order, right?
Mm-hmm.
They talk to a bunch of people in Law and Order episodes that are like, I can't help you. Like, but they still point them, I can't help you, but Joe Bob can. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
There's always a pointer to the next clue, to the next point, to the next person to talk to. That works really great for when you're doing storyline. That's Intrigue. On the action side of that, maybe you cross somebody that you shouldn't have, right? Maybe you've stepped into the wrong part of town. Maybe you know what I mean? Like, there's things you can do where on the pursuit of finding that next bit of information, if they're on the wrong path, you could throw some action at them, and that would help. You
went to a bar to meet a contact, and you walk into some sort of gang altercation. Right. Whether that altercation has anything to do with your contact or not, who knows?
Yeah,
it could.
You'll find that out eventually.
And I think too, appropriate use of red herrings. Like,
yeah, you can't have all red herrings.
Right. But if you don't have red herrings,
everything becomes too easy.
Yeah, like, okay, so pick on Walker, Texas Ranger.
Right.
I don't really remember there ever being any significant red herrings in that series.
No, not really. But that was just because we needed to get to the punching and the kicking.
Right.
I mean, and that's the thing. That's what I was talking about earlier when I say at your table. If your table is really interested in the punching and the kicking, dump most of that Intrigue stuff and get them more punching and kicking, right? Like, if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. Play to them. And if your play style doesn't match that, well, that's a conversation you need to have with yourself about maybe building another table or having a conversation with your players. But that's a different, we've talked about that a lot. But realistically, if you're fine with it and your table is like, oh, I understand the storyline, but I want more action. Give them more action. Give them more stuff, Don't make a player that's going to sit there bored don't make a bunch of players that are going to sit there bored during Intrigue sections. Do it if you don't have to.
Yeah. So just thought, can you use red herrings in action?
Yes, I have.
Like, so to speak, you have a fight that they think is important, but then it really wasn't.
And then you bring it all the way back around to then it was. That's the fun party trick.
Or you use that fight that they actually didn't need to have to ramp up your intrigue, because now something happened in the intrigue while they were busy with the fight.
Well, here's a perfect example of that. had my players go to the Feywild, where the Summer and Winter Queens had been fighting. And they found a kraken in a swamp that used to be a winter court town.
Mm-hmm.
So that builds intrigue on what happened here. Why is there a kraken in a swamp? And, what is going on that the two queens are fighting this bad?
Mm-hmm.
It helps build that story. And, was the kraken productive? No. Was that town a red herring? Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had sent them to that town to talk to somebody in particular. And then they get there and the town is, ta-da.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to use speaking roles necessarily to be a red herring that can still subvert and change the player's direction, is what I'm driving at.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, like I said, I don't know. Like, I know you need to switch back and forth, and we've just talked about, I think, some good examples for people to look at for inspiration, I guess. I almost feel like that's getting into kind of advanced storytelling technique, which,
I mean, isn't that always how this goes? We always end up in the deep end on some stuff.
which, I wonder, I'm sure there's got to be some books out there or whatever you can read on some of this stuff if you wanted to, but like I just feel like, if you consume, some of this media where, like we talked about, how Rebels, you have the intrigue undercurrents underneath the action, Walker, you have the intrigue leading up to the action. The Expanse, you kind of have the intrigue feeding the action, feeding the intrigue, feeding, it kind of swirls. And well, to quote the one line, it's like a churn, so there's a lot of different ways you can kind of bounce back and forth. And I think to make it the most successful you can, you kind of need to use a mix of all of them, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I completely agree with you.
Well, that's good. That means I'm at least not totally off my rockers.
Well, since we're not totally off the rockers, why don't we move into Game of the Week?
Woohoo! Game of the Week.
Game of the Week. Game of the Week.
All right. So I have a game. It's sort of a game. It's a system.
Okay.
That I'm very interested in. It's currently pay what you want. It is called MISC. MISC.
Okay.
I'm sending it to you. It is a generic system built around running games using a 52 card deck.
Okay.
Was designed primarily for one-shots in a contemporary setting, but the version we have here can be played at any length and any complexity of genre. Character sheets take up only half a page, and it just seems like a really simple pay what you want miscellaneous tabletop RPG.
No, that sounds neat. I know you've been kind of fascinated lately with card-driven games too.
Well, yeah, I am on the quest to find a good deck of card-driven game because, honestly, I like the idea of having a book and a deck of cards and that being it that I'm showing up with.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying, right? Like,
oh yeah,
buy a cool deck of cards, have this book, and you're good to go. And I think it would be neat. But yeah, that's mine. Mine's called MISC, MISC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that looks neat. All right, so I have found one, and it actually, well, as we're recording, it released yesterday. It's from Evil Hat Productions, and it runs off the Paragon system, which was out of John Harper's Aegon 2nd edition.
Oh, okay.
Now, there's not a lot of information on this here, but what there is intriguing, and being as it's coming from Evil Hat,
I'm sure it'll be good.
You have a clue as to kind of what you're getting, right?
Yeah.
So the blurb is as follows. Congratulations, you have been selected to participate in Deathmatch Island. Winning will mean fame, freedom, and unlimited wealth. You may be experiencing some confusion and memory loss. This is normal following the selection and recruitment process. It is normal that you do not panic. And so this is a fast-paced game about a deadly game show on a mysterious island chain. Your competitors, which are going to be, I guess, your players and probably NPCs, don't know how they got there. They've been selected, recruited, forced to risk their lives, blah, blah, blah. But there's also a mechanic to this where you choose whether you're going to destroy each other or try and work together and break the game.
Nice.
And I don't know, it just sounds really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds neat.
Now it does not say whether or not you need to already have the Aegon game or if all the rules are included with it. I'm guessing that at 200 plus pages and a $15 PDF, it probably has what you need in it, but I don't know that. It doesn't indicate that here. There are some links in the drive-through listing to like a couple of YouTube videos, some stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's called Deathmatch Island, and it's from Evil Hat Productions.
Very cool. Very cool.
And one more thing on the lines of Game of the Week that I wanted to mention, something that's literally just launching. Well, I put the initial post up right before we started recording. We're going to try and do an RPG book club on our Discord.
I did see that.
And so what we did, actually part of the goal is for, because many of us have stacks of things that we keep meaning to read and haven't yet. And so what we did was, I don't know, for about a week or so, we had people nominate books that they'd like to be considered.
Okay.
And so then we put up a poll and let everyone vote on what they thought we should use as our first book for this book club. And turns out our winner for the first one, which will be starting, well, basically now, is Fantasy Age 2nd Edition from Green Ronin. But what we're going to do is every month or so, we're going to, probably through a poll and probably, again, keeping some of the titles that maybe didn't win but had a good number of votes, we'll kind of roll that forward into the poll for the next month. And the idea being we can read the games, discuss them, in a post dedicated to that system, like a thread. And hopefully the theory is we can all work through our stacks somewhat, because we all know it's easier to stay with something if you've got someone else doing it.
Right, pushing you to do it.
By the way, there's a link to Deathmatch Island because I forgot to post that.
Cool. Thank you.
So yeah, if you want to check out our RPG book club, come to the Discord. Obviously anyone can join in.
Yeah, anybody. You don't even have to listen to the podcast. If you know people that'd be interested in that, have them come over and join the Discord at the very least.
Mm-hmm. We can discuss it, things we like, things we don't like, etc. Cool. Like, just kind of a way to
give everyone a push to read them books that they've been talking about reading for months.
Right?
I get it. I dig it. Well, with all that being said, we want to thank everyone for listening. As always, links to everything are in the show notes. Don't forget to check us out on Discord, Patreon. Come hang out in our Discord. If you feel like throwing us a couple bucks, come join the Patreon. We are alternating weeks now, back to podcast and actual play. We have Oblivion War going up every other week. Mm-hmm. And yeah, with all that being said, we want to remind everyone to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @andrpgs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.